WCW started off as a very, very, very distant number 2. In fact, it was so far down the earth, down the mantle, down the earth's core. What the hell is Hillary Swank and Del Orlando doing down there? What the hell? Get the hell out of the earth's core. You ever seen a man say goodbye to a really bad disaster movie? Once. Nevertheless, WCW was able to get itself out of the goddamn Earth's core and mantle and back up over the claw and be like, oh, I can breathe. Clarence, I want to live again. They were able basically to turn things around eventually, kinda, and then they were really able to turn things around when Ted Turner said, Eric, I want you to sign Hulk Hogan. Bring him over here. Ted Turner as Skeletor would be absolutely wonderful. And then he said, sure, I'll open the pocketbooks for Randy Savage and anybody that Vince basically had. If Vince had him, get him. We got a guy from Vince, as Larry Zbyszko said. But if you have a guy from Vince, that just means he's done with them. They ain't drawn, or otherwise you wouldn't have Vince's guys. But then Eric Bischoff was able to launch Nitro, and even though there were some stumbling blocks, and it was the Hulk Hogan show for quite a while, they were able to rise up with Hall, Nash, the NWO, and they were able to take things higher and higher and higher, and Starrcade 1997 was the biggest pay-per-view ever for WCW. And the finish of that, and some other bad decisions, standards and practices, and so many other things going on, like the big money contracts and the fact that WCW needed to sell out arena after arena after arena, and Thunder shouldn't have been created, and they needed to have so many pay-per-view buys, basically everybody in the goddamn country buying pay-per-view that was watching WCW. They needed to make so much money, and they were making record profits. Until 1999, when they lost $15 million. And a bunch of other bad decisions would lead to the massive, rapid erosion of WCW well before it should have happened. And let's just get to it. I'm John Wortham with Who Killed WCW Episode 2. The streak is over! Yeah, this episode. By the way, this is up hours earlier than usual because I had different shifts this week that I was able to watch this live. And I do have some thoughts. This is probably going to be a little more detailed, like the episode 1 review, and thank you guys very much for the feedback on that, and for watching the channel. I really do appreciate it. So, don't get me wrong, I do love WCW. I do wish that WCW was still around, or at least was around for a number of years, after it had been closed down. Just better management. Maybe Bischoff's group could have bought it. We could have seen what happened. Maybe they could have found a way to get on another network, whatever it is. There would have been something kind of cool. Actually, in hindsight, considering that, TNN, that, got rebranded to Spike TV, had WWF at the time, wouldn't it have been kind of cool for the USA Network to make an offer to WCW? But nevertheless, yeah, we saw the rise, we saw all the stuff. The finish of Starrcade 97, it was still one of the dumbest decisions because they lost a lot of fan faith. Recaps of episode 1, Hogan signing NWO, the rise, and the start of the crash. Do not misunderstand. If you look at WrestleNomics, and by the way, support WrestleNomics and the staff if you can. They do provide great work and some great detail. If you take a look at the pay-per-view buy rates, they were doing well before Starrcade 97 and even after Starrcade 97. Even though they would never hit 700,000 or so pay-per-view buys, they would do pretty damn well. Bash at the Beach 98 would do pretty well. I think Starrcade 98 had 60,000 pay-per-view buys. Somewhere around that. So they were doing well. And Harvey Schiller, president of Turner Sports, basically, starts out with Ted wanting TBS to have Thunder. The thing is, though, is the people running, basically the whole empire, because Turner no longer has much influence, because the AOL Time Warner merger that finally, I guess, was completed in 2001, I believe. They didn't want, to offer the budget for Thunder. So now, instead of having Nitro, 3 house shows a week, maybe 2-3 house shows, whatever it was, the lighter work schedule, and a pay-per-view every month. Now they were having Nitro, and then 2 house shows. They were having Thunder on, I believe, Wednesday, if I remember right. And then they were having more house shows, so they might get 2 days off. But the thing is, so many of those big money contracts, Hall, Nash, Hogan, Savage. Even though by 98, Savage was pretty much fucked. I think it was like right after Spring Stampede 98, I think he was basically done because his knees were absolutely toast. Actually, I think he was at Slamboree 98, but his knees were toast. He was done. Like, he was done. And then when he came back, he was juiced to the goddamn guild. I love Randy Savage, but my God, he was insanely juiced. But they had so many talents. Piper. Flair was in the midst of the issues with Bischoff, where I wish they would have gone into that a little bit, because that would have been kind of nice to talk about that. They'll probably talk about some of that and, mix up the timelines like they've been doing so much here with the footage and everything. I think the people putting this together, they love wrestling, but I don't think they understood how to tell a fully cohesive narrative. Whole point is, WCW had a lot of big money contracts. They have so many people signed up that even if you had, 20 guys making 150 grand a year, 20 guys making 150 grand a year, that's a lot of goddamn money. That's a lot of goddamn money, especially for people that were just sitting at home. You had Lenny Poffo, I believe, that never wrestled a day in WCW. What'd he make? Like 250 grand a year? He got paid close to or $1 million and never worked in WCW? I don't think he worked a fucking house show. So you have Thunder, and Thunder in hindsight was a bad idea. Now, yes, WCW did influence WWF to do it better and have SmackDown. They had the pilot that I recently retro-viewed, by the way, at the end of April 1999, and then they got picked up in August of 99. So yeah, WCW basically was having to pay a lot more, and they were having to, spend more of any of their profits to put Thunder on the air. And instead of maybe just having, Nitro, and then you have Thunder the next day, and you just drive the production team there, and then you send everybody home. No, Nitro, day off for for travel, whatever it is. And then you have tapings again, I believe is how it went. And Brett was brought in basically to anchor Thunder. Now, no, you couldn't put him on Nitro. And look, I get that there were logistics. You couldn't have him wrestle for a little bit. You couldn't have him wrestle for a little bit. You can't tell me that he couldn't have appeared on the next Nitro, the night after Survivor Series. I mean, unless... Because if he signed with WCW, that means his contract with WWF is null and void. There was no no-compete clause. If there was, how the hell was he able to appear in another program? Put him on Nitro the next night after Survivor Series and just say, you got as long as you want, Brett. We got a 3-hour show. Go out there. Foot on the goddamn throat right there is what they had. Even though WWF was rising up and they had a solid foundation on pay-per-view, and they were making more money on pay-per-view because of the revenue split and all that. WCW didn't have that. $2.8 million a year, and they never used him right. Oh, sure, he was U.S. champ. Sure, he was a 2-time world champ. He was a tag team champion. Name, besides the match that he had against Chris Benoit, renowned murderer Chris Benoit, that is, on the Owen Hart tribute show at the Kemper Arena. That was the 4th of October, 1999, I believe. Besides that, can we name that many matches that Brett had that were really, really good? I mean, his match against Ric Flair at Sold Out 98, which was his first pay-per-view match, by the way, was fine. But, yeah, so he basically got paid almost $9 million a year. I mean, plus royalties, I imagine, so he probably made a pretty good mint. And I believe Gene Okerlund said on that Monday Night Wars episode, it was either the Heart of War one, I think it might have been. It's like, he was a big star over the world, a global commodity, and I don't care what they paid him, he was worth every nickel. And he was. The thing is then you have to utilize him. And they didn't. Brett wanted to at least do something like, okay, he didn't want to go there, but at least he was like, okay, I'm going to do something, and he wasn't allowed to do anything. Undefined role as a referee at Starrcade 97. Match with Flair between two great wrestlers, and then he was off various pay-per-views. I think World War III 98 was the last pay-per-view that he had, match he had in 98. He wasn't on Starrcade. I don't think he wrestled again until Uncensored or Spring Stampede of 99. No, Uncensored of 99, maybe? So he wasn't on pay-per-view, like, really all that much. And then he had the leg injury, and then Owen's death happened, and rest in peace, Owen. So he wasn't back until, like, late August, early September of 99, and he got hurt. I'll get to that. But then they had to write 10 hours of television in 2 days, because they still had WCW Saturday night that they were taping. They have Worldwide and Pro, I believe. Those were their syndicated shows, which I think were each an hour. So Saturday night, I want to say sometimes even was 2 hours. I don't know why. But you had Nitro. That was 3 hours. Nitro got put to 3 hours in 98, 99, I believe. I don't think in 97 they were 3 hours. But then you had Thunder. That was 2 hours. So if you had Saturday Night, Worldwide, and Pro, that's 8 hours right there. The whole point is you can't write that much television in 2 days. You could if you actually had any coherency and any management and any all this stuff. But no, if you knew what the fuck you were doing. I think Nash even said that. You could if you knew what the fuck you were doing, but they never knew what the fuck they were doing. So then their idea was just throw everything at the goddamn wall to see what stuck. NWO Black and White, NWO Wolfpack, the LWO. The biggest thing, and this is what I'm going to talk about before I really dive into the rest of the episode. They didn't elevate people quick enough. Yes, Diamond Dallas Page was older than a lot of the up-and-coming stars, but he got himself over before the feud of Randy Savage. He'd had some really, really good matches besides that. And he probably should have been the one to beat Goldberg's streak at Halloween Havoc 98. Because listen to the pop when he hits the fucking diamond cutter. Listen to it. It would have been amazing. Granted, some of the pay-per-view audience wouldn't have been able to see it. I remember that watching that at a friend's house. He was one of the unfortunate people that lost the pay-per-view feed, and then we had to see the match next night. And they were one of the ones that got a goddamn refund. But they didn't elevate Booker T. Eddie wasn't elevated quick enough. Ray had an injury, I think, like later in 97 and in early 98 had to take time off because of knee surgery. Jericho was a conspiracy victim guy. Ironic, considering the bullshit that his wife did on January 6, 2021, that he would consider himself a conspiracy victim, but I digress. They had plenty of good people that they could have elevated, and they refused to do that because the veterans kept taking television time away. Oh, look, Jericho's back again, only in AEW. But Brett went from face to heel to face again. It made no sense. And if you think about it, from the time that he debuted, like sometime I believe in December of 97, he was a heel by what? Sometime in like the spring or summer of 98. And then it just flip-flopped back and forth, and they just wouldn't do anything. I'm not saying he needed to be on every television. But if you have Brett, fucking use him. They said they would fly him in there and not use him. So he spent time away from his family. He was getting his check. But good God. Raw beats Nitro on April 13th, 1998 for the first time in almost 2 years. Last time they did was, I believe, June 10th of 1996. And then Bill Goldberg, which I'm going to refer to him now as because that's what Brett did, and also because it's funny. I just find it funny how he says Bill Goldberg. He enters a fray, and look, a football player got injured and taken out in 94. He was finally able to get into wrestling. Goldberg, natural as far as a look, as far as impact, as far as intensity. I'm not going to knock that. I will knock the fact that he would always injure people, and he was never given time to basically train and figure out how this stuff worked. They just put him on the road. The power plant footage was kind of fun to see, because with a lousy training program, you could tell. He was impressive for a time. But it did kind of get stale, because then it's like, okay, yes, people were reacting, but then listen to how people were reacting even before his streak ended. They were still reacting, but there were starting to be some, annoyed fans there. And then DDP says, there's never been a push like this anywhere. Oh, good God. There were in plenty of older companies. Plenty of companies without television. Plenty of companies with just film. Yes, this had cable, television coverage, worldwide coverage in some cases because of all the syndicated deals that they had. So yes, it was impressive to see, and he was 107-0 when he won the world title, but whatever. Brad Siegel, I thought, actually has some good lines in this, and Brad Siegel actually does come across as somebody you're sympathetic towards. He may have butted heads a little bit with Eric, but it also was out of his hands. He was doing what his bosses told him to do. Bill basically took it so seriously. I believe Nash said, get some skills. Yeah, you should get some skills. Brett was not very complimentary. Hogan calls Eric and says, I want to put over Bill in the Dome. Clean. Hogan wasn't going to be on that goddamn show, though. See, that's some fact that, gets forgotten about. I think I forgot to mention it when I talked about the Bill Goldberg WWE on A&E biography episode. Hogan wasn't going to be on that. Hogan realized, holy shit, maybe I need a new contract, because I can't remember if his contract was coming up or whatever. Maybe he just wanted to justify his contract. He wanted to get a boost in pay, or he wanted to do something. He wanted to prove to the Turner execs, holy shit, this is what he's doing? So anyway, they should have put it on pay-per-view and not on television. Yes, they got big ratings. It was their first victory in 11 weeks, but at what cost? You're telling me that they couldn't have built to maybe not a buy rate as big as Hogan and Sting, but they could have built up to something that would have been their second biggest pay-per-view buy rate. They could have done north of 500,000 pay-per-view buys. The execs didn't want WCW to succeed. And then we see Rocky Maivia, and Rock would say that he would finish his match and he'd be back in the hotel watching Nitro, wondering how they could capture that magic. That's disrespectful to leave the show before it's done unless you're told to, Rocky. No wonder he might have run people the wrong goddamn way. At least that's what I've heard. I've never been in wrestling, but I heard that from a lot of wrestlers. You stay until the show's done. Bischoff, in a meeting with executives, be family friendly, not like WWE. They show stuff like Val Venus with a porn star. Ironic that he became such a crackpot conservative piece of shit. Probably embarrassed by the fact that he did that, and that's the only thing he'll be remembered for. Dusty in the NWO. That was at Sold Out 98. Louis Spicolli was there. Louis Spicolli, that was his last pay-per-view appearance. He would die before, was it Super Brawl 98? I think it was. Bischoff basically wasn't a fan of the standards and practices thing. He was out of energy. And look, I will knock Eric on some things, but I do agree that he came up with a lot of good ideas. He just had no way to manage them. Even if WCW had better management, and even if the Turner executives had been behind them, they were still going to lose money because of all those big money contracts and all the stuff that they signed. And yes, there were no license, or there weren't a lot of licenses, the merch, that kind of stuff. They didn't have the machine built like WWF did. Nash took the book. They talked. They kind of messed up that timeline. It was sometime in February of 99, I believe. Not at Starrcade 98. Nash talked about how Goldberg had the bill, or how Bill Goldberg had the belt for too long. He won it on July 6th of 98 and lost it at the end of 1998. That's barely 6 months. They barely featured him as champion. I think he had a championship match at Bash at the Beach 98. He was in a Battle Royal at Road Wild 98. He had he had Fall Brawl off. He had that great match against DDP at Halloween Havoc 98. And then he was off, I believe, World War III 98. Bill Goldberg talked about messing up stuff with Scott Hall, some spots, and Hall's like, what the hell are you doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong. Bless the guy for actually going out there and doing stuff. He could do impressive stuff, but the thing is he basically just was a more intense version of Mongo if you think about it. He really was. Think about it. If he didn't have somebody to lead him, he could do a few things, and that was it. And I'm talking about as far as experience level. Obviously, Goldberg and Mongo, I know, massive health issues. I'm not knocking the man, but it is what it is. He faced Nash at Starrcade 98. They had to take the belt off him, because yes, the babyface should be chasing, but it's how you do it. The finish was all fucked up. Talked about that on multiple shows. Because there was no way to follow it up properly, and even if they tried, they fucked it up with the finger poke of doom. Bill Goldberg got arrested for stalking Miss Elizabeth, and they messed that up, and then also that'll put butts in seats. I've talked about that on multiple shows. It was a bad line. It wasn't Shivani's fault. People say Bischoff was producing him. Bischoff was on commentary that night. So unless Bischoff said during the break, hey, Shivani, I want you to say this, how was he going to tell him to say that? So, then, finger poke of doom. Nash defended it. Oh, it made people mad. Oh, you got him. No, you pissed people off, you fucking idiot. And same Bischoff was even kind of, oh, you have to do shock stuff. No, you don't. Yes, their ratings still were in the 5s or high 4s for a couple months. But then look where they were by late April, early May. They were bombing. Yes, sold out at 330, 340,000 pay-per-view buys thereabouts. Super Brawl 9 had 485 pay-per-view, 465 or 485,000 pay-per-view buys. It was thereabouts. Uncensored had around 360, 350,000 pay-per-view buys. And Spring Stampede in the Tacoma Dome, I was not able to be there, unfortunately, 250,000 pay-per-view buys. The last pay-per-view they had to hit 200-something thousand pay-per-view buys was Mayhem 99. I believe the Halloween Havoc got close to 250,000. I think it was around 220, 230,000. But the whole point is from... And Super Brawl 9 was an anomaly. They were going down. And they just didn't focus on the future. They had no focus week to week. Footage of a Turner executive meeting on C-SPAN. The budgets were being worked around, oh, let's take this stuff and let's make this portfolio look better. And let's lay these losses off on WCW. Again, ignoring the fact that so many of these contracts, whether they were from through Turner Home Entertainment or through WCW, the way things were set up, it was doomed to fail because, yes, they cut a whole bunch of guys in, like, the fall of 99. And they still lost $15 fucking million. That's the thing that just blows my mind. They were losing money, and I mean, I don't buy for a second, by the way, that, the executives were doing every single thing like that in their power. I think they were doing some of that stuff. But WCW was starting to falter and then was losing money by the time mid-99 rolled around. So, of course, they were going to do stuff like that because they wanted to increase the value of various things. Also because the AOL Time Warner merger was really going to be kicking into gear by the new millennium. So, They were just $15 million in 99. God knows how much in 2001 if they had stayed in business because they lost 60 to $65 million in 2000. Bischoff basically got pulled into Harvey Schiller's office. There was a stooge guy that said something about misuse of funds. These big money contracts would result in a kickback back to Bischoff. But Schiller's like, we don't believe it. And no, I don't believe that Bischoff would get a kickback from that. I believe Bischoff was getting a fine enough salary from WCW and getting bonus for being the executive vice president and producing results. So no, I don't believe for a second that he was getting kickbacks. So I believe the misuse of funds. Yeah, they were paying fucking Chris Adams and Lanny Poffo and various others how much money to sit at home or do jobs for no reason? You could get local guys to do that stuff? I feel bad saying that about Chris Adams, but he beat his goddamn wife, so he can go fuck himself. I hope he died painfully. So, Brett was so goddamn pissed at WCW for misusing him, and then Starrcade 97 at 99 at Bill Goldberg. And I talked about that. I talked about that in the Bret Hart piece. Talked about that in the Bill Goldberg piece. I've talked at length. I did a rant about Starrcade 99. I don't believe that Goldberg meant to do it. but he was a klutz. And sure, he was remorseful, but he also could have said, hey, I'm going to do this kick. Let's do it like this. No, he didn't want to trust Brett to help him. Brett just got kicked right in the goddamn face. He said, you imbecile. Called him an imbecile. Called him a whole bunch of stuff. But, Goldberg, well, that's part of the game. Yeah, well, you act like you suffered a career-ending concussion. The only concussions he ever suffered was hitting his head into the goddamn door to bust himself open because that's what he did for football. Forgetting, yes, this is something you need to make look real, but it's a work. It's a goddamn work. Bischoff gone by September 99. That's months before all this happened. They said the AOL Time Warner merger happened in 1996. Was that the start of the merger? Is that why standards and practices came around? I thought the merger finished in 2001. I don't know how long these mergers take. I don't have a fucking clue. Turner lost control of the company. Bischoff was miserable. Fall Brawl 99 was first pay-per-view without him in charge. And he went fly fishing the next day. And you know what, honestly, it was probably better for Bischoff to go do that because for all his faults, which are many, he did do a lot good for WCW. Now, next week is Vince Russo's time in WCW, or at least the beginning of it. And a clip from him, and I am searing this into my skull for when I review this shit. And when I basically just take Vince Russo to task as a wrestling fan, I'm going to say this right now. Vince Russo is one of the biggest cancers to ever happen to professional wrestling. I'd say that to his fucking goddamn face. I'd tell his kids that he's a fucking cancer. I'd tell his stupid wife that he's a goddamn cancer. And Russo would just sit there and take it because that's all Russo knew how to do. Because Russo couldn't win a fight. He couldn't actually win a verbal battle against anybody. Anyone could kick his goddamn ass. Anybody could kick his ass. Reed Flair kicked his ass. Reed Flair now could kick his ass. And Reed Flair, unfortunately, passed away about 11 years ago. It's unfortunate that Vince Russo still plagues this goddamn earth, but he said, I was better than 80% of that roster. That roster that put in more blood, sweat, and tears than you ever have put into anything in your life. Failed video store, failed everything. He is a failure of a Christian, but then again, failure and Christian kind of goes hand in hand. And if you don't like that, here's the thing. I'm referring to the people that are the fake type, not the type that actually uses stuff to justify, the goodness in them and use these stories to be a better person and help people. Vince Russo is the antithesis of everything that I hate about wrestling and humanity. And he deserves to know that. He deserves to know that from every wrestling fan. And that is exactly what any of his cronies need to know. And the fact that he still even has cronies is kind of goddamn baffling. Trust me, I would know. I have unfortunately had to deal with some of them. Some people that want to claim to be virtuous and everything, but they aren't. The whole thing is, Vince Russo felt he was better than 80% of the WCW roster. It's a damn shame that Vince Russo was able to walk out of that cage, dressed in a football helmet and everything and that kind of stuff, and he got a concussion, which is impossible because he doesn't have a brain to get concussed. But that's for next week. That's the little tease. So anyway, yeah, pretty good episode overall. They skipped over some things that I tried to get into. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ricklin. I'll see you soon.